A 9-year-old girl sat alone in a cemetery on a rainy night. For 2 days, no one stopped. No one believed her to be normal. They called her unstable. Until a soldier showed up, and what he did next made the entire system bow its head. Light rain had just begun as Raymond Cole drove away from the Veterans Memorial Service at the town hall. The dashboard clock read just shy of 10 p.m. He didn't turn on the radio. His drives home were usually as quiet as the state of his heart these days. The rain wasn't heavy, but it was steady. Drops thudded gently against the windshield, triggering a memory from another place, another time. A place where it rained too. But over battlefields, he'd rather not revisit. He turned onto Forest Hill Road, as he always did. The road cut through the cemetery that shared its name. There weren't many homes here, just a couple of flower shops, an old payphone booth, and the tall iron gate leading to the final resting place of hundreds. No one came down this way at night, except Raymond. But tonight, something was different. In the dim glow of a street lamp, he saw a small figure curled up near the cemetery gate. At first, he thought it was a homeless person, but as his vehicle drew closer, he saw it clearly. A child. A little girl, soaked from head to toe, hugging herself, clutching something that looked like a picture frame. Raymond slowed the SUV, pulled over, and angled the headlights toward her. He turned off the engine and stepped out, not hurriedly, but deliberately. "What are you doing here, sweetheart?" he asked, softening his voice as much as he could. The girl didn't respond. Her eyes were half shut, her small body trembling. Raymond stepped closer, knelt down. She barely reacted. "Hey, can you hear me?" He tried again, gently touching her shoulder. This time, she flinched, her head lifted. Red, swollen eyes stared back at him. Her whole frame shrank like a drenched kitten trying to disappear. I'm okay. I'm waiting," she whispered, her voice catching. "Waiting for who?" Raymond asked, glancing around. No cars, no adults in sight. She hesitated, then murmured, "I'm waiting for my dad." Raymond looked at her more closely. She couldn't be older than 9. Wet brown hair clung to her cheeks. Her shoes were waterlogged and misshapen. The coat she wore hung off her, oversized and torn at the sleeves. Then he looked at the picture frame she was holding. Inside was a man in military uniform. The photo was worn, the edges peeling. In the glow of the headlights, the rank insignia on the man's shoulder was visible. A name flashed in Raymond's mind. Adam Turner. Something inside his chest missed a beat. Suddenly, a voice called out from across the street. "You seen her, huh?" Raymond turned. It was Mildred, the elderly flower vendor who often sat near the cemetery gate during the day. Now she stood under the awning of the old phone booth, propped up by a weathered umbrella. "She's been there since yesterday," she said flatly. "I called the police. They said they'd come, but nobody's shown up yet." Raymond frowned. "How long have you been sitting here, kiddo?" he asked the girl. "Yesterday and today," she said faintly. "I slept a little, but I didn't want to leave. Mama said she'd come back." Raymond sighed. He stood and turned to Mildred. "Did you ask her name?" "She wouldn't say." The old woman shook her head. "Just hugged that photo. Like a ghost, I tell you. A kid sitting outside a cemetery all day. Folks see her and just steer clear." Raymond crouched again, locking eyes with the girl. "You cold?" She nodded silently. Raymond slipped off his coat and gently draped it over her shoulders. "My name's Raymond. I won't hurt you. But it's raining. And if you've got no one to take you home, I can't just leave you here." The girl didn't respond, but she didn't resist either, as he eased an arm behind her back and helped her to her feet. Her legs were stiff, nearly frozen. "Do you remember your address?" he asked. Silence. Raymond didn't press. He turned to Mildred. I'll take her to my place for the night. I'll call the police again in the morning." "You be careful, Raymond," she said slowly. "This world sometimes doesn't show kindness to those trying to do good." Raymond nodded. "I know." He carried the girl to his vehicle. She didn't fight it, just clung tighter to the photo against her chest. The SUV pulled away from the cemetery in silence. The rain still fell, steady and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of someone too familiar with loss. 10 minutes later, Raymond opened his front door and guided the girl inside. The house was modest but warm, neatly kept. A few military medals hung on the wall. The girl looked around, but didn't ask anything. "Would you like something warm to drink?" he asked, reaching for the kettle. She sat quietly on the edge of the couch, legs drawn up. "I'm not hungry. Just a little scared," she murmured. Raymond paused, turning toward her. "Scared of what?" A beat of silence. "Scared of being taken away," she said, barely audible. "Everyone wants to take me somewhere, but no one asks if I want to go." Raymond didn't respond. He understood that feeling all too well, the helplessness of having decisions made for you without anyone truly listening. He set a warm mug of cocoa in front of her. "You can stay here tonight. Just think of it as shelter from the rain." For the first time, the girl met his eyes. "My name is Ellie." "Hello, Ellie," Raymond said gently. "You're safe now." Across the room, a photo of Raymond's late daughter rested on the shelf. In the soft amber light, her eyes seemed to quietly watch the two survivors, seated in that quiet house, each carrying something lost inside them. And from that moment on, something began to shift. Not because of a promise, not because of blood, but because of one simple act. He didn't walk away. The next morning the skies had cleared. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still damp and cold. Sunlight streamed through the small window in Raymond's house, casting a soft glow onto the worn carpet beneath the coffee table. He had woken early, not because of an alarm, but out of old habit, his instincts still trained to rise with the sun. In the kitchen, water bubbled softly in a pot. He didn't make anything fancy, just reheated some oatmeal and prepared 2 cups of hot cocoa. One for himself and one for Ellie, if she was still there. Raymond stepped quietly into the living room. She was still there, curled up on the sofa, wrapped in a thick blanket. The framed photo of her father rested beside her pillow. Ellie wasn't crying like many abandoned children might. She lay still, as if used to surviving on her own. Raymond set the tray down on the table and took the seat across from her. After a while, Ellie stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open. When she saw him, she sat up quickly, alert but not panicked. "Did you sleep okay?" Raymond asked, sliding the cocoa toward her. Ellie nodded slightly. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. He picked up a spoon and served some oatmeal into a bowl. "You can try a little. It's warm, good for your stomach in this weather." She lowered her head, grasped the spoon with both hands, took tiny bites, as if afraid she might spill. Raymond didn't push her. He let her eat, quietly watching until she was nearly done. "Your clothes are all wet," he said gently. "I have a few of my daughter's old things here. They might fit you." He stood and walked into the old back bedroom. Ellie changed in silence. The cream-colored sweatshirt and slightly baggy jeans were clean, faintly scented with old wood. When she came out, she paused in front of a small bookshelf. On it stood a framed photo, a little girl, about 6, beaming as she stood beside Raymond in uniform. "My daughter," Raymond said softly, as if reading her thoughts. Ellie didn't ask. She just nodded. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's all right," he replied. "She passed away years ago." The room fell quiet for a few seconds, not heavy, with grief. Just still. A silence that didn't need explaining. Raymond sat down at the table and unlocked his phone. "I'm going to call the police. Let them know I found you." Ellie tensed. "I don't want to go back there." Her voice was barely a whisper, but there was no hesitation. "Can you tell me where there is?" Raymond asked gently. For the first time, Ellie lifted her head. Her eyes were red, but dry. "She said we were going to visit my dad. Said it was a surprise. Then she drove me to the cemetery, stopped at the gate, told me to get out and wait." Raymond's gaze stayed on her. "And then?" She looked down. Her voice dropped lower. "I waited, a long time. At first I thought maybe she'd come back. But then it got dark. And no one came. No one at all." A long silence passed. Then Ellie spoke again, like she'd been holding it in too long. "She's my dad's new wife. After he died, I lived with her and her daughter, but she said I was a burden, that I ate too much, snored too loud, that I didn't belong, that nobody wanted me now that he was gone." Raymond realized his hands had clenched into fists without him noticing. Ellie looked straight into his eyes. "I knew she wasn't coming back, but I didn't want to cry. My dad didn't like it when I acted weak." Raymond took a deep breath. His voice came slowly, deliberately. "You didn't do anything wrong. No child deserves to be treated like that." Ellie dropped her gaze again, said nothing. Raymond didn't press further. He called the police, his voice calm and steady. He gave his name, his location, and explained that he'd found a young girl outside the cemetery the night before. The officer said they'd arrive within 2 hours. Before hanging up, they asked, "Did the child give her name?" Raymond glanced at Ellie. She sat quietly, still staring at her father's photo. "Ellie," he said. "Any last name?" the voice on the other end asked. Ellie whispered softly, "Turner." "Ellie Turner." Raymond froze. His eyes flicked back to the photo in her hands. That face. He'd seen it before, at a memorial service years ago. Adam Turner. Lieutenant Colonel Adam Turner. Raymond stood and walked into the other room, rummaging through an old box of keepsake photos. He pulled out a faded group picture from their unit. Adam stood, front and center. Tall, strong, smiling kindly. He brought it back out. "Your father was Adam Turner." Ellie nodded. Her eyes were red again. "My dad was a soldier. He told me to be brave. Never cry in front of others." Raymond sat down and placed the unit photo beside Ellie's framed one. "He and I served together. He was a good man, very respected. Dad said, when I'm scared, I should close my eyes and picture him standing behind me," Ellie whispered. The room went quiet again, but this time it was a silence shared in understanding. After a moment, Ellie stood up. "Can I borrow some paper and colored pencils?" Raymond nodded. He retrieved an old sketch pad and a box of colored pencils from the shelf. Ellie sat and began to draw. She didn't speak, just focused. Raymond watched from a distance. She drew well, confident lines, intentional strokes. Nothing random. After about half an hour, she set the pencil down and handed him the page. It was a simple drawing, but it said a lot. A little girl stood between two adults. One was a man in military uniform, smiling, hand resting on her shoulder. The other was a woman in a red dress, turned away. Raymond looked closely. The woman's face was left blank, as if Ellie didn't remember or didn't want to. "Who is that?" he asked softly. Ellie looked down. "I don't know anymore. She didn't say goodbye. And maybe that woman in the red dress didn't just turn away in the drawing. She turned her back, in real life too. The police car pulled up in front of the house just before 10 a.m. Raymond was already standing on the porch. Ellie sat inside, still clutching the picture frame in her hands. Two officers stepped out. One older, the other younger. "We received a report about a girl named Ellie Turner," the older one asked calmly. "Yes," Raymond nodded. "She was out by Forest Hill Cemetery the night before last. I brought her home. No one came looking for her." The younger officer opened a small notebook, casting a quick glance toward Ellie, who was sitting quietly inside. "Did the girl mention any family?" "She said her father was Adam Turner," Raymond answered, slow and steady. "A soldier." The older officer paused for a few seconds, then asked again, "Lieutenant Colonel Adam Turner?" "The one who passed away last year." "That's him." There was a brief silence. Then the younger officer stepped toward the door and gave Raymond a respectful nod. "We'll be taking her to temporary care at Maple Creek Shelter while we verify guardianship." Raymond stepped in. "That shelter's no place for a child who just lost her father and has now been abandoned again." "Procedure is procedure, sir," the younger officer replied, not unkindly, but firmly. "We have to enter her into the system until it's clear who has legal custody." Ellie paused on the porch steps before stepping into the shelter's car. The social worker had already opened the door, but Ellie turned back to look at Raymond. Her voice was soft, nearly lost in the breeze. "Please believe me, no matter what anyone says. I'm not lying." Raymond froze. His heart tightened, as if an invisible string had been pulled taut from her eyes to his. Eyes that weren't pleading, weren't angry, just filled with a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, one adult would believe her. As the car pulled away, Raymond remained on the porch. In his hand was Ellie's drawing, the one she had left on the table. A man in uniform stood behind a little girl, but his face was hidden in shadow. The woman in the red dress had her back completely turned. And right then, Raymond knew this wasn't just a lost child. This was a buried story, and he couldn't walk away. That afternoon, Raymond drove to the neighborhood where the Turners used to live. He had passed by years ago for Adam's funeral, but never went inside. It was a quiet ceremony. No friends, no fellow soldiers. Something about it had made him uneasy back then. Today, that same feeling returned, stronger than ever. The house stood at the end of Green Hill Road, a two-story home, white-painted, sloped shingle roof, and a small flower bed by the front door. But the grass was overgrown, untended. Patches of paint had faded in several places. Raymond walked up and knocked on the door. A few seconds later, a woman opened it. Miranda Lowe. Mid-30s, blonde hair curled softly, slender build. Her face was tidy, makeup done just enough. She looked neat, respectable, but her eyes held no warmth at all. "Can I help you?" she asked, tone even, raising an eyebrow slightly. "I'm Raymond Cole. I served with Adam," he said gently. "I need to ask you a few things. About Ellie." Miranda hesitated for a beat, a quick blink, almost reflexive. Then a faint smile appeared. "Ah, Ellie, I heard she's been taken into care, hasn't she? Do you know why she was out alone in the cemetery? In the rain?" Raymond asked directly, voice calm but firm. Miranda exhaled and shook her head slightly. "We had some conflicts. Ellie's not easy to live with. Ever since Adam died, she's been very unstable. I tried, but at some point, I couldn't manage anymore." Raymond glanced past her into the house. The interior was tidy. Too tidy. No signs that a child had ever lived there. No photos, no toys, no sounds. "You're saying she ran away?" he asked again. "Yes. I reported it to the police. I have the records, Miranda replied quickly. But honestly, I think Ellie needs professional help. She has psychological issues. Raymond held her gaze for a moment. It felt like talking to someone who knew exactly how to hide behind a flawless mask. He didn't bring up the trust fund, didn't ask about the money. Right now, he only wanted to confirm one thing. Had Miranda truly looked for Ellie? Or had she wanted the girl to disappear? She sat outside that cemetery for 2 days, holding her father's photo. No one came looking, Raymond said slowly. Miranda offered a tight smile. I didn't know. She went back there. Maybe emotions drew her. I don't believe Ellie means harm, but I also can't sacrifice my stability for a child who won't cooperate. That last sentence made Raymond's jaw clench. He thanked her, then turned and left. Later that afternoon, he drove to the elementary school where Ellie used to study, a simple red brick building nestled in the heart of town. Miss Bailey, Ellie's homeroom teacher, met him in the faculty lounge. Ellie was a good student, she said. Not many friends, but respectful and hard-working, and she loved her father dearly. Had she been attending school recently? Miss Bailey shook her head, then opened her notebook. About 2 weeks ago, we received an official notice that Ellie had moved in with relatives on her mother's side. The paperwork was all in order. It surprised us, but everything checked out. Raymond frowned. No one verified anything. We asked, but parents have the legal right to make those decisions. We're bound by the limits of the law. She paused for a moment, then lowered her voice. But I did once notice a bruise on her arm. When I asked, she said she fell down the stairs, but the way she said it felt like a rehearsed answer. Raymond bowed his head. The anger inside him rose quietly. That night, Raymond sat alone in Tom Greer's garage, the flickering fluorescent light casting dim reflections on a grease-stained workbench. On the laptop screen, a video clip showed him carrying Ellie into his house. No sound, just a scrolling caption. Veteran holds girl in home for 2 nights. Suspicious behavior. The footage was taken from outside the living room window. Someone had staged it, exactly as he'd suspected. Miranda didn't just want to erase her tracks. She wanted to ruin him before he could speak the truth. His phone vibrated. Raymond picked it up. An unknown number. Mr. Cole, a dry male voice said, "This is Jacobs, president of the Veterans Association. We're forced to suspend all your activities until that video is clarified." No explanation. No chance to respond. The call ended cold, like snowfall on a gravestone. Raymond set the phone down. He wasn't angry, just sat there in silence, staring at the footage, where Ellie's trusting gaze had been sliced into something resembling guilt. Tom said nothing. He simply pushed a mug of coffee toward his friend. "We need proof. The kind that punches them in the face. You want to fight, then hit where it hurts." Raymond stood up. "I need to see Ellie." "You won't be able to." Tom shook his head. "After this video, the center's definitely going to block you. They're afraid of liability." "Then I'll give them something bigger to be afraid of." Raymond wasn't bluffing. He drove straight to Maple Creek, a cold beige building on the edge of town, the red brick walkway moss-covered, the sign peeling with age. The receptionist looked at him like an intruder. "I need to see Ellie Turner," Raymond said directly, holding out the police confirmation slip he had kept from the day he filed the report. The staff member frowned. "We've been instructed not to allow you contact. For the girl's welfare." "Welfare?" Raymond's voice dropped. Was it for her welfare when she sat outside a cemetery for 2 days and no one noticed? She hesitated, clearly unsettled, but held her tone. "Unless you have written authorization, you'll need to leave, sir." Raymond stood still for a few seconds. Then, reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the drawing Ellie had left behind, a sketch of a woman in a red dress, facing away. He placed it gently on the counter and said, "Take this to director Lucinda Marsh. Tell her I still keep my promise." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, just as the rain began to fall again, soft and steady. That evening, Raymond sat at his kitchen table, flipping through the old file Adam had once mailed him, back when he was still alive. A thick envelope. Inside were copies of a life insurance policy, an education fund plan, and a single handwritten note. "If anything happens to me, make sure my little girl gets the education she deserves." Raymond gripped the envelope tightly. The next morning, he called Tom. "I need your help. We have to look into Adam's education fund." "You sure about this?" Tom asked. "If I'm wrong, then at least I'll know I tried. But if I'm right, then Miranda isn't just a bad mother. She's a thief." By noon, Raymond and Tom were at the military bank. Tom had an old contact in the trust division. It didn't take long to get a copy of the file. E. Turner Education Fund, opened on May 14th with $400,000, set up by Adam Turner before his death. On August 9th, Miranda Lowe was listed as the legal guardian, and just 6 days after the funeral, the entire fund was drained. On their way out, they stopped by the flower shop near Forest Hill Cemetery. Mildred was adjusting a bouquet of white chrysanthemums behind the counter when she saw them coming. "I was questioned this morning," she said before Raymond could speak. "They asked if I staged all this with you. I don't care who you are, Raymond Cole, but I saw you carrying that little girl when this whole town turned its back." Raymond placed his hand on the counter. "I need your testimony. Would you be willing to stand as a witness?" Mildred didn't reply. She simply walked to the back room and returned with a small USB stick. "I've got a camera on the flower counter. For safety. It records 24/7. This is the night that poor girl was left behind." Back at the garage, Raymond and Tom plugged in the drive and watched the footage. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Rain falling. An SUV pulled up in front of the cemetery gate. Miranda stepped out, visibly pregnant. She opened the back door, pulled Ellie out, and sat her right in front of the gate. She said something to the girl, then turned around and drove off. Raymond's hands clenched. "Is that enough?" "More than enough to destroy her." Tom nodded. "But we have to hit at the right moment, and we'll need someone the public trusts." "Sam Riley," Raymond said immediately. "Field reporter for KMX News. He's the one who exposed the child abuse scandal at Hopewell Boarding School. I still have his number." That afternoon, Sam received the footage. He called back in under 30 minutes. "I'll air it. No edits, no commentary. But are you willing to go on record live?" Raymond gave a short reply. "I don't need sympathy. I just want people to believe Ellie." By morning, the internet exploded. The footage of Miranda abandoning her stepdaughter in the middle of the night was everywhere, captioned, "Who truly abandoned Ellie Turner, and who really deserves to be questioned?" Media outlets began asking hard questions. Accounts that had once shared videos smearing Raymond quietly took them down. Some bloggers reposted the image of Ellie sitting in the rain, clutching a picture frame to her chest. But the other side didn't stay quiet. That afternoon, Raymond got a call from Lucinda Marsh, director of Maple Creek Foster Services. Her voice was cold as steel. "Mr. Cole, if you continue to make contact with Ellie, we will be forced to file a restraining order." Raymond didn't hesitate. "Then you'd better prepare for tonight's headlines. I just sent the press a recording of your phone conversation with Miranda, where you agreed to lock the girl away to keep things quiet." Lucinda froze. You recorded me?" Raymond hung up. He hadn't recorded anything. But he knew one thing. When cornered, the guilty always blink first. That evening, he drove to Forest Hill Cemetery and laid a bouquet of white chrysanthemums on Adam Turner's grave. The rain still fell, but softer now, like a fine mist over the rows of aging headstones. Raymond stood quietly, then whispered, "Adam, I don't know if you can hear me, but I won't let them bury your daughter a second time. I promise." In the distance, the streetlights cast long shadows across the cemetery gates, where Ellie had once sat, waiting for the father who never came back. But now, someone else was standing there, and this time, he wasn't walking away. Raymond didn't sleep, not because of fear or panic, but because one sentence kept echoing in his mind, like a voice in an empty room. "I don't want to go back." It wasn't a plea. There were no tears, no hysteria, just a cold, stripped-down truth, as if Ellie had long accepted she didn't get to choose. Raymond sat in the living room, gently turning an old photo of his daughter in his hands. The edges were worn and peeling, but her eyes were still as clear as they were that morning, right in front of her elementary school. The last morning he ever saw her alive. That day, he promised he'd make it back in time for her piano recital. He didn't. An ambush in Fallujah held him back, and his daughter died in a school bus crash on her way home. He had carried that guilt for 7 years, never forgave himself, never forgot. But this time, Ellie was still alive, and this time, he could keep his promise. 11:41 p.m. Raymond knocked on the garage door at Tom's place. As soon as it opened, the smell of solder and motor oil hit him in the face. "Can't sleep, huh?" Tom said, sliding his safety goggles up onto his forehead. "I need your help," Raymond replied. "I need to hear the things they don't want anyone hearing." Tom raised an eyebrow. He didn't need to ask who they were. "Lucinda Marsh." Raymond nodded. His voice was firm, unshakable. "I don't need much. Just a clip. Something real." Tom opened a tool cabinet and pulled out a small recording device, barely the size of a deck of cards. "Stick it under the table or in a vent slot. Records for 12 hours, loops over itself. But if they find it—" "I know," Raymond cut in. Tom looked at him for a moment and then gave a short nod. Then just once. "And Raymond, don't be stupid. You're not in Fallujah anymore." Raymond gave a faint smile. Didn't answer. The next day, Raymond returned to Maple Creek, entering from the back lot like an internal staffer. He'd been here years ago to help a fallen comrade's child. Nothing had changed. Cold grey hallways, plastic signs, fluorescent lights that made the place feel more like a VA hospital than a group home. At precisely 12:03 p.m., during the supervisor's lunch hour, Raymond entered the staff lounge. He bent down to tie his shoe for exactly 12 seconds, planted the device under the conference table, and walked out like he'd never been there. That evening, back in Tom's garage, they downloaded the data. The first 2 hours were nothing but chairs scraping, phones ringing, vague conversations. Then, a familiar woman's voice came on. "That girl. She still hasn't forgotten that old soldier, keeps asking to call him, keeps crying, saying he promised he'd come back." A second voice, lower. "What do we say if the oversight board asks?" Lucinda's voice again. "We say she's delusional, anxiety-related. I've got the file, signed and dated. They won't question it." Tom paused the audio. The room went still. Raymond leaned back in the chair, fists clenched. He wasn't surprised, but it still hit him in the gut. They're burying her alive with a signature. "They faked her psych file?" Tom asked, voice dry. Raymond nodded, eyes wide open. No words. "I'm going to see Lucinda," he said. "With this?" Tom asked. Raymond shook his head. "Number. With what she thinks I have." Tom smirked faintly, nodded slowly. Bluff her with something we don't have. Scare her with what she knows she did. The next day, Raymond showed up at Maple Creek as Ellie's former temporary guardian. He asked to see Lucinda. She looked surprised, but knew she couldn't dodge forever. Inside the meeting room, Lucinda tried to maintain composure. The coffee on the table was still steaming. "I'm afraid you no longer have any legal right to contact Ellie," she began. "The guardianship review process is ongoing." Raymond sat upright, calm, looking her straight in the eye. "I know she's filing for it. And I know you were in the meeting with Miranda Lowe last week." Lucinda flinched, just slightly. Raymond pulled out his phone, didn't press play, just placed it on the table. "I have a recording from that meeting." A heavy silence fell between them. Lucinda stared at the phone like it might explode. "You can't possibly—" "I also have the part where Miranda says, 'If the Maple Creek case comes out, I've got this to twist it back.'" Raymond paused, then added, unwavering, "And I don't lie." Lucinda bit her lip, still staring at the phone. "What do you want?" Raymond leaned forward, voice low. "I don't want your job, but I will not let you throw Ellie into a psych ward over a paper you signed without a second thought." Lucinda said nothing, but she understood. That evening, Raymond sent the actual audio recording, the internal conversation from within Maple Creek, to reporter Sam Riley. It was enough to reveal a system turning a blind eye to the manipulation of children's records. At 9 p.m., Sam opened the news segment. "We've just obtained an internal recording from Maple Creek, a facility where a young girl named Ellie Turner was detained under the label of psychological disorder. But according to the tape, the facility's own director admitted that the diagnosis was fabricated to keep the girl quiet." The broadcast played a portion of the audio. Then came footage of Lucinda Marsh leaving the building, swarmed by reporters. "Ms. Marsh, did you sign off on a falsified medical report? Is it true you're preventing Ellie Turner from contacting her legal guardians?" Lucinda gave no answer. She simply walked briskly to her car. The door closed behind her in silence. The next morning, Maple Creek was subjected to an emergency federal inspection. Ellie and 5 other children were transferred to a new facility, this one under independent oversight. Raymond wasn't allowed to make contact, but he stood at a distance beyond the fence. As the transport van carrying Ellie passed by, she looked out the window. Their eyes met. For just a second. No wave, no words. But her gaze had changed. There was no more fear. Only one thing remained, the belief that he was still there. That afternoon, Raymond returned to Forest Hill Cemetery. The grass was still damp, the sky still grey but lighter than on any day before. He walked slowly to his daughter's grave and placed a single white daisy. He didn't say a word. A moment later, he placed another bloom, this one for Adam Turner. "Your daughter's strong," Raymond whispered, "and me. I promise she won't be alone." A breeze stirred across the row of headstones, cold but not biting. In that moment, Raymond felt someone behind him. Not one person, but many. Fathers, soldiers, men who had once made a vow and paid for it with their lives. Raymond clenched his hand. This time, he would keep his promise while still alive. The morning in the small town began with the tap-tap of young birds on the damp roof tiles and the mingled scent of coffee and the faint hiss of an old gas stove. But inside Tom Greer's garage, there were no birds. Only the soft clack of a keyboard and the steady flip of printed pages. Raymond sat at the center table, his face hollow from a sleepless night. Spread before him was a printout of the Ellie Turner Trust Fund statement, each key date marked in red ink. May 14th, Adam Turner establishes the trust. August 4th, Adam dies during a training exercise. August 9th, Miranda Lowe is officially named legal guardian. August 15th, entire fund disappears. Raymond set his pen down, pressed his hand to his forehead, and let out a long breath. I need to know what she did with that money, where she sent it, how she cleaned it. Tom stepped forward and dropped a file folder on the table. My guy at the bank just sent this. Miranda's last big transaction was a real estate purchase. Raymond looked up. Where? Tom unfolded a city map and pointed to a red circled area. Everglade Heights, golf course estates on the west side of town. Big homes, quiet, surveillance everywhere, no kids registered to live there. Raymond nodded slowly, his voice turning low. She threw Ellie out onto the street, emptied her father's account, and moved into a mansion with another man's child. He slipped on his jacket. We need to see inside that house. Tom looked at his friend, as if about to object, then just shook his head. If you get arrested for trespassing, I'm pretending I don't know you. You'll say I was just out for a walk. That afternoon, the pickup truck stopped more than 300 meters from the gates of the estate. Raymond opened the trunk and pulled out a military-grade scope. Through the magnifying lens, the white villa came into view. 3 stories, sloped roof, wrap-around porch, and a black SUV in the front drive. The same kind of vehicle that had left Ellie behind at the cemetery. Tom pulled a small drone from his backpack, folded out the wings, and attached a battery. How far can it fly? Raymond asked. 1,200 meters, directional mic attached, but it only picks up clean audio if we're close to an open window. Tom glanced up. If the wind shifts or the TV's on, we'll get static. We've got one shot at this. Raymond nodded. The drone lifted into the sky. Light wind, stable flight. The tablet screen slowly revealed a bird's-eye view of the estate. Roof, backyard, terrace. Then circled toward the second floor, where one window sat slightly ajar. The first bits of audio filtered in. You still have those backups? A man's voice, not unfamiliar to Raymond. Of course, Miranda replied. If that washed-up soldier tries to blow up Maple Creek, I've still got this to crush him. Tom leaned in, increasing the volume, squinting. Chad Kramer. Raymond stared hard at the screen. Chad, Miranda's boyfriend, was seated beside her on the couch, his hand resting on her belly. Miranda's stomach was clearly larger than the last time Raymond saw her. She was heavily pregnant. On the screen, a laptop sat open on the coffee table, playing a video of Raymond and Ellie. But it had been altered. She used that clip to smear me, Raymond muttered. Tom whispered back, and now she's using it to keep Chad close. The drone hovered, circling tighter near the second-floor window. On a side table, the camera captured a folded court document. One line was visible in bold print. Ellie Turner, hearing for guardianship review. Raymond froze the video. What the hell is this? Tom tapped a few commands, zoomed in, then scanned it quickly and exhaled. Miranda's filing to have Ellie declared socially unfit, claiming she can't adapt to a family environment. If the court agrees, she'll strip Ellie of her inheritance rights. Raymond leaned back, face unreadable. She doesn't just want the money. She wants Ellie to legally disappear. That evening, Raymond sent the drone footage, video and audio, to Sam Riley, the veteran journalist who had helped him before. He added a message. She's orchestrating an entire plan to legally abandon her late husband's daughter. This is the proof. Air it as soon as possible. 6 a.m. the next morning. The local news opened with the steady, recognizable voice of Sam Riley. After being accused of abandoning Les Taos, Colonel Adam Turner's daughter, Miranda Lowe, now living with a new partner in Everglade Heights, is preparing to file for full removal of guardianship and inheritance rights from the 9-year-old girl, named Ellie Turner. On screen, Miranda's voice, clearly recorded, laughing then saying, "I keep backups, just in case I need to crush him." Then came the drone footage, Miranda and Chad inside the villa. Their faces were partially blurred, but the voices were untouched. The court hearing letter appeared on screen for several seconds, long enough to send shockwaves. Social media exploded. Justice for Ellie began trending within 2 hours. Thousands of users, from single mom forums to veteran communities, flooded the web with questions. Where is Ellie Turner? Who is her legal representative? How can a manipulative stepmother with clear signs of deceit be allowed to petition for guardianship removal? 9:12 a.m. Raymond's phone rang. "This is Claire Monroe. I'm an attorney with the Child Advocacy Council. I just saw the broadcast. If you have evidence that Ellie was abandoned or harmed intentionally, I'll represent her in court." Raymond didn't hesitate. "I have everything." "Then be ready. The next hearing won't be just paperwork anymore. We're taking all of this into the light." Raymond hung up. He stood, pulled the garage curtain aside. Sunlight broke through a thin layer of clouds, casting a soft glow over a still damp oil stain on the floor. The sky was no longer grey like the days before. Something had shifted. He took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like just a survivor, trapped in old memories. Today, he was back. Not just as a man, but as a father who wasn't giving up. On a Monday morning, Raymond Cole walked into the county courthouse lobby looking like a different man. White dress shirt, neatly knotted tie, and a folder tucked under his arm. Not the isolated veteran, not the victim of a smear campaign, but a father standing up for a child no one else dared to stand beside. Attorney Claire Monroe waited for him outside room 302, a woman in her 40s, dark hair tied back in a tight bun, eyes sharp, yet not unkind. "Did you bring everything?" she asked briskly. "Financial statements and internal recordings," Raymond replied. "And I've filed for an emergency guardianship petition." Claire nodded. "We're not just playing defense, we're going on the offensive." At the child welfare office, Ellie sat on a small blue plastic chair, legs swinging, not quite reaching the floor. The room was warm, but she stayed curled up like she was still cold. In front of her sat a new social worker named Valerie, short red hair, clipboard in hand. "Do you remember the last time you saw your stepmother?" Valerie asked. Ellie gave a slight nod. "She took me to the cemetery, told me I should stay there, to learn how to accept that Dad's not coming back." Valerie stopped writing. "Did she come back for you?" "No. Has anyone called, come to get you, or sent you a message?" Ellie shook her head. "Only a man, Uncle Raymond. He let me sleep on the couch, gave me oatmeal. But they took me away before I could say anything to him." Valerie looked at her for a long moment, then removed her glasses. "Would you like to see him again?" For the first time in days, Ellie nodded without hesitation. At that same moment, Raymond and Claire were submitting their case to the Office for the Protection of Children's Rights. But just before entering the preliminary hearing, Claire handed Raymond a fresh set of documents. "Someone from Maple Creek sent me this anonymously this morning." Raymond opened it. It was a copy of a fabricated psychological report, the same one Lucinda Marsh had mentioned during an internal meeting. The conclusion read, "The child exhibits signs of emotional instability, mild paranoia, and is unfit for placement in a typical family environment." In the corner was the doctor's signature, except the doctor had retired 2 years ago. Raymond's hands clenched. "They made up a diagnosis to lock her into the system." Claire nodded. "Exactly. But now we've got the weapon to turn everything around." That afternoon, a closed hearing was held. In the room sat a representative from the family court, Miranda's lawyer, a slick man in a shiny suit who exuded arrogance, and, on Raymond's side, Claire. Ellie waited in a separate room, with video connection available only if the court allowed her to speak. Miranda's lawyer began. My client, Mrs. Miranda Lowe, is the legal stepmother of Ellie Turner. She is currently pregnant and not in a physical or mental condition to care for a psychologically unstable child like Ellie. She respectfully requests to transfer temporary guardianship to the authorities and remove Ellie's name from the inheritance list associated with her late husband's estate. Raymond said nothing, but under the table, his hand clenched into a tight fist. Claire stood. We object to the entirety of that motion. We are filing for immediate relief. The invalidation of a forged medical record, an investigation into financial fraud, and the transfer of guardianship to Mr. Raymond Cole, the only adult who has directly cared for Ellie since she was abandoned. The judge furrowed her brow. Do you have any evidence the psychiatric report was falsified? Claire opened the file. The doctor who signed it retired in 2022. And here's an audio recording of the center director admitting to fabricating the file to keep Ellie under control. The tape played. Lucinda's voice rang clear, undeniable. Miranda's attorney shot up to object, but Claire raised her hand and cut him off. We also have a video of Miranda Lowe admitting to staging a manipulated video smear campaign against Mr. Raymond Cole. It aired on the morning news today. The judge paused for a few seconds, then asked, Does the child, Ellie, wish to speak? Claire nodded. She's asked to speak, if permitted. The screen turned on. Ellie appeared, dressed in a white shirt, sitting in the supervision room. Her voice was small, but steady. I'm not sick. I'm just sad. I miss my dad. I don't understand why people want to turn me into someone nobody trusts. The judge asked, Do you want to live with Mr. Raymond? Ellie nodded. Because he was the first person who asked if I was cold. The room fell silent. The judge glanced down at the file, then let out a breath. I need more time to review everything, but starting today, Ellie will be placed in a neutral home, not under the care of Miranda Lowe or Maple Creek Center, and Mr. Raymond Cole is granted unlimited visitation. Raymond didn't smile, but in his eyes, for the first time in years, something long buried flickered back to life. Hope. Later that day, Raymond visited the new shelter. Ellie was out in the garden, sitting alone with a small dog named Lucky, a gift from the care staff. When she saw him, she didn't run, but she stood up, walked slowly, and took his hand. No tears, no words. Raymond sat down beside her on the bench. You okay? Ellie nodded. I spoke today. I think my dad heard me. Raymond looked at her for a long moment. I think so too, and I'm sure he's proud. The two of them sat together. No more shadows, only a quiet flame burning in the night, just enough to warm two hearts that had once been left behind. 3 days after the hearing, a special broadcast aired on KMX News at 7 p.m. The anchor, Sam Riley, composed and assertive, opened with a line that made the entire town pause mid-dinner. A child abandoned in a cemetery, a soldier slandered, a system that forged documents to bury the truth, and a pregnant woman who isn't the mother. This is the story of Ellie Turner. The screen cut to drone footage of the Everglade Heights estate. Miranda's voice came through loud and clear. If that old man Raymond exposes the Maple Creek incident, I still have this clip to shut him down. Then Chad Kramer's face appeared, the prime suspect, now officially exposed as Miranda's current lover. Sam looked up, locking eyes with the camera. What Miranda Lowe didn't realize is this: the soldier she tried to destroy doesn't walk away like she does. Less than 10 minutes after airing, number Justice for Ellie was trending statewide. Thousands of comments poured in. Why was a girl who had been living peacefully suddenly labeled unstable? So if you don't have a biological mother, you don't deserve love. I used to trust this system. Not anymore. In his closing remarks, Sam Riley said simply, "That night, Raymond Cole, a grieving veteran, didn't walk away when he saw a child abandoned, and he didn't stop. The question now is, what will we do?" Raymond didn't watch the broadcast live. He was with Ellie in the reading room at the shelter. She was practicing her spelling using children's books, a stubby pencil, and a notebook filled with crooked lines and messy handwriting. "I spelled this wrong." Ellie pointed to the word protection, which she'd written as protection. Raymond raised an eyebrow. "Close enough. But I think protection isn't just a word. It's something you deserve, even if no one ever gave it to you." Ellie didn't answer. She simply erased the misspelled word gently and rewrote it, this time correctly. Raymond sat still, watching her. He didn't need words to understand what had just happened. A child had begun fixing what no one ever gave her a chance to fix. The next morning, Claire Monroe's law office received a call from the State Department of Justice. A federal investigator was being assigned to audit the records at Maple Creek and to review the full financial trail connected to the Ellie Turner Trust Fund. Claire called Raymond. "We've moved the ball to a much bigger field now. This is no longer just a custody case. This is statewide financial fraud and child rights violations." Raymond asked only one question. "Will Ellie have to testify?" "Not yet, but if she does, she won't be alone." At the same time, Miranda Lowe was served a subpoena. The court document was delivered straight to the gates of Everglade Heights. A freelance photographer captured the exact moment she tossed it into the trash, her face tight with exhaustion, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. The image went viral. Top comment: "You can't throw justice in the trash, Miranda." That afternoon, Raymond got a private call from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was male, quiet, slightly shaky. "My name is Marcus. I used to work in IT at Maple Creek. I kept backup files. They told me to erase them, but I didn't." "What kind of files?" "All the altered medical records, the cash payment logs, a full list of special parents who paid to keep certain kids silent." Raymond couldn't breathe. "I don't want my name out there, but I'll send it to you. They can't keep doing this." The call ended. Standing beside Raymond, Tom simply said, "We're not just two people anymore. We're a wildfire." That night, Ellie asked if she could eat dinner with Raymond in the small kitchen at the shelter. She ate slowly, still a little guarded. But for the first time, she asked a question, not to get an answer, but to open a door. "If I'm not here tomorrow, where would I go?" Raymond set down his fork and knife. "Where do you want to go?" Ellie thought for a moment. "I want to be somewhere no one asks." "Are you really okay?" "Just to check a box." Raymond nodded. "Then we'll find that place. But before we go, I need to help you get back what they took." "What did they take?" "Your name, your voice, and the truth." Ellie didn't reply. She just kept eating, but this time she smiled. Not big, not long, but it was her first real smile. The next morning, in the center's library, Ellie carefully wrote on a small sheet of paper, "I don't need a perfect mom. I just need someone who won't walk away when I need them the most." Ellie Turner, 9 years old. Raymond looked at the handwriting and slipped the paper into his coat pocket. One day, he would bring that note into a courtroom, not to win, but to remind the adults some children wouldn't need protection if we hadn't broken their world in the first place. Courtroom 3, Elkhorn County Courthouse. Tuesday morning, 9:12 a.m. The public gallery was packed. Reporters, parents, law students, and local residents. No one wanted to miss the trial that had shaken the entire state. Raymond Cole wore a simple black suit, no tie. A small pin from his old unit was clipped to his breast pocket. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. He simply rested his hand on Ellie's shoulder. She sat beside Claire Monroe, her legal representative. Ellie wore a cream-colored dress, her hair neatly tied back. In her hands was an old stuffed rabbit, the only thing she'd asked to keep from Maple Creek. It wasn't pretty, but the worn stitching told a clear story. Someone had once needed it just to make it through the night. Miranda's attorney, Jack Fallon, opened the defense with a tone that teetered on arrogance. My client, Mrs. Miranda Lowe, only did what she believed was best for a child in emotional distress after losing her father. Every action taken was for Ellie Turner's safety, and we have psychiatric documentation to support that. Claire stood, responding immediately. And we have proof that she falsified medical records, transferred money from Ellie's trust fund into her own account, and colluded with a care facility known for a history of child abuse, Maple Creek. The courtroom buzzed. Judge Ruth Hill banged her gavel. I want evidence, not emotion. Both sides, present in order. The morning tightened like a drawn bowstring. Witnesses were called in sequence. A neighbor testified that Miranda had locked Ellie in a shed overnight. An IT technician named Marcus submitted data logs showing alterations in Ellie's medical file. One of Ellie's former elementary teachers stated, she showed no signs of emotional distress until she moved in with her stepmother. But by noon, Miranda struck back. Her voice trembled as she testified, I'm not perfect, but I didn't abandon Ellie. She ran away. She kept talking to people who weren't there. I was scared. I'm pregnant. I just wanted to protect us both. Fallon then submitted a shaky video of Ellie muttering to herself in front of a mirror, edited in a way to suggest signs of psychotic behavior. A wave of doubt rippled through the room. Ellie lowered her head. Raymond leaned in and whispered, "Look at me." She looked up, and for the first time raised her hand to speak. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the room. I wasn't talking to the dead. I was talking to my dad, in my memories. My stepmother didn't cry when he died. She just asked, "What did he leave behind?" I didn't run away. I was pushed out. The door was locked. I had no bag, no money. No one believed me. She took a deep breath, then pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, the one Raymond had given her the night before. A letter in a child's handwriting. I don't need a perfect mother. I just need someone who won't turn away when I need them most. Judge Hill asked, "Who wrote this?" I did, Ellie answered. Not to win, just to have one adult actually listen. There was a long silence. Finally, Judge Ruth Hill spoke. The court hereby terminates all custodial rights of Miranda Lowe and orders a criminal investigation into allegations of financial fraud and falsification of medical records. Temporary guardianship of Ellie Turner is granted to Mr. Raymond Cole, under supervision of attorney Claire Monroe and the state's Child Welfare Agency. The court also orders a federal investigation into the operations of the Maple Creek facility. Miranda stood up and screamed, "She's my child! You can't—" But two officers restrained her before she could say another word. In the blinding flashes of the cameras, Miranda was no longer the legal mother. She had become the embodiment of custody as a tool for self-interest. Ellie turned to Raymond. "We're not going back there, are we?" Raymond leaned down, gave a soft nod. "Number." We move forward. Outside the courtroom, Claire faced the press. The crowd closed in. This story isn't just about a neglected child. It's a question for all of us. When a child says, "I'm hurting," how many of us actually stop to ask, where? Raymond stood in the background, silent. He watched Ellie sit on the courthouse steps, wearing the same small backpack she'd had since the first day. She pulled out the stuffed rabbit, set it on her knee, and stared out at the lawn ahead, as if seeing the future for the first time. And for the first time in years, Raymond felt his heart was no longer hollow, not because he had won, but because a child, once invisible to the world, was now standing tall, with no one left to shove her down. Springtime in Elkhorn doesn't bring snow, but it doesn't blaze with sunshine either, not like other places. The air just feels softer, quieter, as if the whole town is holding its breath, waiting for someone to begin again. Out on the porch of Raymond Cole's small house, a new wooden sign had just been hung, painted white with hand-lettered words written in careful script, Turner Cole Home. That name didn't end up there by accident. Ellie had asked for it, and Raymond hadn't said no. 6 weeks after the hearing, Raymond was officially granted guardianship. All the paperwork, the psychological evaluations, reports from Claire Monroe and Child Services, every part of the process confirmed what everyone already knew. Ellie didn't need a perfect home. She just needed someone who wouldn't walk away. The house had changed. The living room now held a shelf of children's books. The second bedroom, once his daughter's, had been carefully redone by Raymond's own hands. Walls painted a soft blue, the window widened to let the light in, and a small desk tucked in the far corner. Ellie had taped her drawings across the walls. Among them, one stood out, a girl in a field, holding a sunflower. Behind her stood a soldier in uniform, smiling. Raymond never asked who it was. He didn't need to. One Friday afternoon, after school, Ellie placed a piece of paper on the kitchen table. "I want to change my last name to Turner Cole. Is that okay?" Raymond froze for a moment. It took him a few seconds to reply. "Your name is Ellie Turner. That's the name your father gave you. But if you want to add Cole, then I'd be honored." Ellie smiled. For the first time, it wasn't a smile shadowed by fear. "I just want that when someone asks me, I can say, 'That's my dad.'" Raymond gave a slow nod. He said nothing, just reached out and pulled her into his arms. The name change ceremony was simple, held at the town hall. Claire Monroe served as witness. A local pastor offered a few heartfelt blessings. When it came time to sign, Ellie's hand trembled. But when the name Ellie Turner Cole appeared clearly on the form, the whole room fell silent, as if they'd just witnessed something greater than a legal act. Recognition. Not from the system, but from the very child once labeled wrong. The following month, Raymond filed for early retirement. He wanted time. Time to teach Ellie how to ride a bike, to draw, to strum a ukulele, and to listen to her read poetry every night. Not to replace anything, but to make up for it. On a quiet Sunday morning, the two of them sat together at the grave of Lieutenant Colonel Adam Turner, Ellie's late father. Raymond said nothing, just rested a hand on Ellie's shoulder as she gently placed a white daisy on the stone. "I'm here now, Dad," she whispered. "I'm still alive. I still remember. And I have someone to lean on." At the far end of the street, there's a small cafe. On the wall by the window hangs a photo, Raymond and Ellie, taken the day the guardianship became official. They stand side by side, holding a sign that reads, "Every child deserves to be believed, at least once." Beneath it, a small inscription, a former soldier, a forgotten child, and a second chance, for both. Raymond never imagined his life would turn this way. But every night, when he walks past her door and sees Ellie sleeping, no longer flinching, no longer whispering, "Daddy," in her dreams like she did those first few nights. He knows he didn't just save her. She saved him too. And if anyone ever asked, is there justice for children who've been abandoned? The answer is yes, but not the kind that comes from courtrooms. Justice begins the moment someone stops and says, "You're not crazy. I believe you." Sometimes, the only thing a child needs isn't someone perfect, just someone brave enough not to turn away when everyone else already has. Ellie Turner's story isn't just about justice. It's a reminder. Every child deserves to be believed, heard, and loved, at least once in their life. And you? Have you ever witnessed something wrong, but didn't know what to do? If you met a child like Ellie, what would you do? And do you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life forever? Please share your thoughts below. I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to hear your story. And, before we wrap up, are you doing okay? Is there something you've been carrying that no one's asked you about? If so, I want you to know this. You're not alone. Thank you for staying with me through the end of this story.